Welcome to this webinar on performance management and managing an employee's substandard performance in line with New Zealand employment law as part of Employers Assistance's pre-recorded webinar series. My name is Kent Duffy, lead solicitor and senior employment lawyer here at Employers Assistance. In terms of an agenda for the discussions, we'll be looking at the differences between performance management and conduct issues, or where it's appropriate to implement a PIP versus a disciplinary process, what that looks like, managing an employee's substandard performance, including informal measures, formal measures, including establishing a performance management plan or a PIP, and finally, Employers Assistance's ebook on performance management, including a sample procedure and template letters and various documentation. There are important distinctions between a performance management process and disciplinary processes. So, performance management process is used to address substandard performance of an employee versus a disciplinary process that's used to address conduct-based issues. So looking at a performance management process, as I said, it's to address an employee's substandard performance. It's about how an employee does their job. For example, their work quality, their outputs, their tasks and duties are substandard, and that's the focus of a performance management process. It's stuff like failing or not consistently meeting their KPIs, and the employer needs to move to address those via a performance management framework. And that can be seen as distinct from a disciplinary process, which is used to address an employee's conduct-based issues. A disciplinary process is usually, or in most circumstances, more straightforward than a PIP. Provided there is clear and convincing information or evidence to support addressing whatever the concerns are about in terms of a disciplinary context. And it's effectively comes down to the employee's conduct. So the most common scenarios when you're talking low level sort of disciplinary issues, you're talking about inappropriate language, repeated lateness, absenteeism without good reasons, insubordination, failing to follow clear work instructions, these sorts of things. As an employer, you'll need to consider implementing a performance management plan or a PIP where the employee's performance is substandard. Not a disciplinary process is usually the starting point. As a manager or supervisor considering this process, you need to be prepared for the end-to-end process. The employer or the supervisor must manage the process, and it requires time, dedication, and planning. The starting point is generally an informal approach, documenting the issues, giving the employee an informal grace period to improve, offering them training and support, these sorts of things. If that fails, then you'll need to consider implementing a formal performance management plan or a PIP. Consultation and a paper trail is key to any good performance management process because it is full of legal risk exposure and they're often very contentious. Once an employer has passed through an informal stage, then it will need to consider formally implementing a PIP, where the employee's performance fails to improve over time. The employer needs to be careful about how it goes about implementing a PIP, which involves formulating the proposed PIP, so a written framework, which includes identifying the specific performance concerns or issues, what those are all about, and how those issues are to be measured and assessed over time. Once the employer has formulated its draft or proposed PIP, then it must formally consult with the employee on the introduction of that performance management plan or the proposed performance management plan. This step includes all the usual formalities, formal invitation letters going out, setting everything of relevance out, including potential outcomes and the process to be followed in the event that the PIP is implemented. What I'm getting at there is the review process and the step-by-steps around managing the employee's substandard performance, including related warnings, right through to dismissal on notice, as well as that advice on basic legal rights, the usual stuff that the person or the employee is entitled to seek independent advice and or bring a representative or support person to any formal meetings. Consulting with the employee before establishing the PIP is essential. going over it and formally meeting with them to discuss the proposed PIP and the detail. Hear what they have to say, and if they have some good or solid feedback, then that may adjust what you put in the final PIP. Once the PIP has been established and implemented, then generally the next step are formal review meetings at regular intervals in between, where if the employee's performance remains substandard, then there can be the potential of formal warnings being issued for their substandard performance if their performance fails to improve. From thereafter, it's generally a rinse and repeat sort of process where warnings are implemented following further formal review periods, up to and including dismissal on notice. Like I said earlier, it's not a fast or a quick process. A performance management process does require a lot of resource and time, management time in particular by the supervisor or the employer, to get it right. So generally, at a high level, a stock standard performance process would probably take anywhere from 2 to 4 months, potentially longer in some cases, to manage properly and thoroughly, including consulting with the employee on implementing a PIP. But it will all be sort of circumstance specific. And it will depend on what's a reasonable time period between each review meeting, or whatever it is that you decide to set, to genuinely measure and assess the employee's performance before you're looking at progressive warnings for substandard performance being issued. Employers Assistance has a comprehensive ebook or guide for everything you need as a manager, supervisor, or an employer where you're considering a performance management process. So essentially, the ebook on performance management is a legal walkthrough on important information employers need to know when navigating this particular area of employment relations or formal process. The ebook includes a sample procedure, effectively a sample process for introducing and managing a performance management plan or PIP, along with a basic step-by-step guideline and associated templates. So the template letters and documents are key, and effectively it provides a basic template framework for managing performance management issues. With, of course, the step-by-step guidelines, which filter into that. So, in summary, the ebook provides templated options for managing an end-to-end performance management process, including setting up the applicable formal review meetings at each stage of the process, and generic template warning letters for substandard performance, these sorts of things, so you don't need to be drafting documents from scratch, or flying blind in terms of trying to figure out as the employer what's the appropriate documentation in the process that you should be looking at implementing when navigating this specific area. That concludes this webinar on performance management. I hope you've gained some useful information and insights into this particular area of employment relations. If you require any further information or want to check out our membership options, visit our website www.employers.co.nz or free phone 0800 15 8000. That's 0800 15 8000.